Hi, welcome to Canaan's Church Online. We are so happy to have you joining us today. If this is your first time with us, we just want you to know our mission here at Canyons is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And we are in week 2 of Love, Dates, and Heartbreaks with our lead pastor, Andrew Powell. If you missed last week, hop online, watch it. It was a great introduction to what we will be talking about over these next few weeks. And a fun way you can connect with us through this series is with a good pickup line. So whether you've heard a good pickup line or someone has used it on you, we would love to hear it here. And there's going to be some fun prizes involved and some different things that we'd love to just share those and have a good time with that. So go online on our Instagram or our Facebook page and share your favorite pickup line because we would love to hear that. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you have a good weekend. We'll see you soon.
Enjoy the show.
Well, welcome to part 2 of Love, Dates, and Heartbreaks. This is a series that I thoroughly enjoy sharing with you. It is so, I don't know, it's one of my favorite things I get to do because one of my favorite things that I actually am part of is my relationship with Amy, with my wife. And if I can help anyone to have that part of their life be so enjoyable and improve and work on, and not that we have a perfect relationship, but I think if we can all improve that aspect of our life, our whole entire life gets better, right? If home is better, if our relationship with our spouse is better, it makes everything else a little bit more, manageable and and worth walking through. If it's not fun at home, nothing is fun anywhere, right? It's not happy anywhere. So I think this is really important. And I just want to real quick, I know that relationship series, often we think like, oh, that's just for the married people. No, this is for everybody. There's some pieces of this that everybody's going to be able to apply to their life, regardless of where you're at. If you're not dating yet, then this is going to give you the foundation, kind of the principles that you need to have in mind moving towards a dating relationship eventually, whenever you get there. If you are in a marriage relationship or a long-term, significant other dating relationship, absolutely you're going to have a lot to apply here. But even if you're at a stage of life where you're no longer married, or you've been married, you've tried that once or twice or 3 times or 4, however many times, you're like, I think I'm just done with that. I didn't work out for me. And if you've kind of sworn off relationships, here's the thing, you still have some relationships in your life, even if they're not dating relationships. And there's going to be so much application for you to be able to use this just in life in general, because the whole principle that we're talking about throughout the series is becoming more like Jesus, and try to actually apply and follow Jesus and his principles that he taught us, apply that to our life. So if we can follow Jesus in our relationships, it's going to be a better relationship. And if regardless of whether that is a dating relationship, a romantic relationship, or just your friends and family that you have around you. So this whole series, it's really for everyone. I think there's going to be some pieces that are going to be able to be applied to everyone. Now, part of this series is painful for me. And it's because I've watched for so long. I've watched other people that make relationship decisions that undermine their relationships. And sometimes I have a voice to try to be able to help someone, warn them what's around the corner of the choice that they're making. And sometimes I just watch from a distance and I can't do anything about it. I just watch someone hurt themselves or hurt the other people in their lives. And it's like, if you just had someone, if you just listen to someone, if you would just do this differently, if you pay attention, if you just pause and stop for a second and evaluate, is this the choice, the decision that I want to be making? And think about what might be at the end of that choice and that decision, what the fruits of that choice might be. I would hope that you'd have a better relationship at the end of the day, this most important relationship that all of us end up having. So this is important. It's painful sometimes to watch from a distance, and that's why this is so important to have this conversation, to be able to, ahead of time, hopefully prepare before you get into that relationship, or once you have that relationship, they're able to navigate and move through that in the right direction. Now, last week, as we introduced the series, there's a couple myths that society and the world around us just kind of hands us, and these myths, it makes us have these expectations for what our relationships might eventually be like. And unfortunately, they're not reality. So when we get into the relationship and those expectations are met and it's different than we were told that it would be, then we get confused and we get frustrated, we get angry, and we get, all upset, and it's like the world is falling apart because it's not perfect. We were told that it would be perfect, right? Because Prince Charming shows up and everything's right, which is actually our first myth, the right person myth, that once you meet the right person, everything will be all right. That Prince Charming shows up, that Miss Right shows up, and all of a sudden your whole past just disappears. The baggage that you've been carrying from relationship to relationship and thinking, as soon as Mr. Right gets here, it's not going to work, it's not going to matter anymore, it's all just going to disappear. That's not reality, because if you're packing some baggage into those relationships and you meet Mr. Right or Miss Right, guess what? You still have the baggage in the relationship. It doesn't disappear. And if you think you found Mr. Right, and then you end up marrying him, and you promise him, and you say, I do, and then all of a sudden you realize, a year later, 5 years later, not everything is all right. You start to wonder, well, is this actually Mr. Right? Is this actually the right person for me? You bought into this myth, which is kind of along the lines of the second myth, which is the promise myth, that a promise replaces the need for preparation. That if you just have a party and a promise, that everything's gonna work out. Because I just need someone to commit to me, and if they commit to me, regardless of their past and regardless of my past and my history and what I've done and what I've told you before but didn't actually follow through on, and regardless of all of that stuff, like as long as you promise me in that moment, if I could just get you to the altar to say I do, then it's all gonna work out and be fine from that point forward. Because think about it, when you look at Hollywood movies and cartoons that we're handed to growing up, that's what happens. You just get to the altar, and then you ride off into the sunset, and everything works out perfectly. In real life, that's not reality, though. In real life, a promise doesn't mean that everything is going to work out. A vow, a commitment, all that makes you is accountable. And if you're accountable but not capable, eventually you'll be miserable. And everybody in the relationship will be miserable. Now, if you're at this spot and you're like, man, that sounds awful, you sound a little bit pessimistic about relationships. I was hoping for some more optimism and some hope and just be more, happy and sunshiny and flowers and rainbows. That's what I was hoping for relationships. Get excited about this. This sounds kind of like a downer. There is hope. And the hope is this, that when we follow Jesus, we talk about this a lot, that when we follow Jesus, that following Jesus makes you better at life, right? When we follow Jesus, life gets better and we become better at life. And that's why this is, moving through this conversation about relationships. It will make you a better person overall, as well as a person worth finding and a person worth staying for in your relationships. Now, Jesus, he actually invites us not to promise, not to negotiate with him, not to pray, just say a prayer. He invites us actually to follow him. And what does that actually look like? We just talked about following Jesus makes us better at life. What does that actually look like? Well, when we follow Jesus, he gave us one command. We talked about this last week, John chapter 15, verse 12. He gave us one command, one simple command. If we would just do this, we would be following him. This is the way that we do this. He said, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Love each other as I have loved you. And if you were here last week and you watched the message and you thought, man, that just seems so open-ended and so soft, like you just love everyone and it works out. That's how this is. Like you just love everybody, you'll be fine. Just love everyone, it'll work out. Like that seems so broad and so soft. Well, today and the next week also, we're going to be looking at the fine print of what it means like to love others the way that Jesus did. And so Jesus, he instates and introduces this new relational paradigm. Paul takes this relational paradigm, this principle that Jesus gave us, this command, and he actually gives us the fine print. And this fine print, let me tell you, this fine print will make you fine. This fine print will make you fine. This will make you someone worth finding, and it'll also make you someone worth staying for in a relationship. So when we talk about dating, as we get into the relationships and we're trying to become that fine person, that person that we want everybody to find us, and we want to find the right person there. I get it. And it's kind of fun, right? Dating should be fun. And dating is actually great practice. It's not great practice the way that the world would tell you that it is. You're like, oh, it's great practice in bed. Like that's where no, that's not where you're practicing. It's great practice to become the person that you want to become. It's not great practice for that aspect of your relationship, because here's the reality. If you're just talking about sex doesn't make a relationship. Sex makes babies. That's what sex does. But when it comes down to it, and we're thinking of that intimacy and that level of intimacy and the relationship that we actually want to have, romance is fueled by exclusivity, not experience. You don't need to go out and have as much experience as possible before you get into that relationship. Exclusivity, where you've protected that, where you've guarded that aspect of your life, that's going to fuel the romance in your future relationships with your future spouse. So that's the priority there. So that's just an FYI. That one's just free for today. I'll just give that one to you away for free. Now we're going to get into, like I said, the fine print of Jesus' new command. And the fine print that Paul gives us, Paul actually gives us the imperatives that are applications. Paul's imperatives are applications of Jesus' new command that he gives us. So this is kind of the how-to. How do you do that? This broad principle of love everyone the way that Jesus loved us. And he's going to introduce this in a letter that Paul wrote. It's called 1 Corinthians. And in this, chapter 13 is kind of known as the love chapter. If you've ever been to a wedding before, you probably have heard parts of this chapter be read. The reason why is because this is so, it's such a profound understanding of what love is, and not the cartoonish love, not the Hallmark, movie type love. This is authentic, real love where the rubber meets the road. What does love actually look like in real life, in a real relationship? So, Paul starts off, verse 4 is where we're going to start off right now, and he says, love is... What do you think? What do you think he's going to say? Love is sexy. Love is aggressive. It's going to be like, take charge. I'm going to be in charge of the whole thing. Or love is smooth talking, good looking. What is love? Well, Paul starts off and says, love is patient. Love is patient. And we don't like to hear that, right? We don't want to hear patient because that's something that we don't want to work on. We don't want to work on becoming more patient. That sounds so just, boring and difficult and challenging and on and on and on. Trying to be more patient is it's a hard one, right? That's a big, high hurdle. But the reality is that love isn't pushy. Love isn't pushy. It doesn't force someone else to move at your pace. It doesn't push someone along and say, nope, even if you're not ready yet, I'm ready, so you need to speed up to move at my pace. No. Love is patient means that it slows down to the pace of the person that you're in the relationship with. It moves at their pace rather than forcing someone else to move at your pace. And you know what? God did that for us. God did that for us. So love is a decision to pause rather than to push. Right? When we want to move forward, when we want to be aggressive, when we want to take that next step, but if they're not ready to take that next step, we decide to push pause. Push pause, that's funny. But we decide to actually pause and let them catch up and move at their pace rather than our own. And the example set here is ultimately by God. That God accommodates our capacity. It's not that he accommodates our comfortability. Some of you are like, no, God's asked me and moved me in the direction that I wasn't ready for. But it wasn't about your comfort. It was about your capacity. He knows what you're ready for, what you're capable of. And God accommodates to our capacity. And that's what we should be doing for other people as well. Accommodate to them rather than making them accommodate to ourselves. So love isn't pushy. In moving forward, this is the next thing that Paul talks about when it comes to love. And again, this is not easy. Love is kind. Like, wait, hold on. That's not what I want to hear that love is like. I don't want to hear that love is just kind. That's so soft. It's so weak. No, it's actually not weak at all. Actually, this is an expression of strength. Because if you're weak, That means that you don't have the self-control to be kind to someone else in their weakness. When you are unkind, this is actually weakness. Unkindness is weakness. When you see that around you, when you see that in your life, when you see that show up in the relationships that you watch, that's actually a source of weakness for them personally in their relationship. So we have to be strong enough to be able to loan someone else our strength, right? So when someone else is weak, we try to loan them our strength. And this is a saying that Andy Stanley has that I love, that I love, that I love. Kindness is loaning your strength rather than reminding them of their weakness. Let me say that again because it's worth saying twice. Kindness is loaning your strength rather than reminding them of their weakness. How often do we do that? I mean, how often do you get in that moment and you're like, you're ready, you're on top of it, you've got all the confidence in the world because it's an area of strength and confidence for you. And yet the person that you're with, this is an area of weakness for them. And you kind of like, you poke fun of them or you say whatever just comes out of your mouth because it's a strength for you. This is where you have a unique opportunity to leverage your strength for their weakness. Because ultimately, kindness is love's response to weakness. Kindness is love's response to weakness. So when we see weakness around us in our life, whether it be, in that most important relationship or other relationships around our friends or family, when we see weaknesses, we should be responding in kindness because that's what love does. Love asks the question, this is a hard one to ask, but love asks the question, what can I do for you? How can I help you today? That's a hard question. When was the last time you asked your spouse that question? And we don't like to ask that question because we know on the other end of that question, there's probably more than one bullet point, right? That's probably a to-do list that we've got that we know is out there. Yet that's how we're kind. We leverage our strength. We leverage what we can to help accommodate someone else. Now, as we go through this, I want to ask a couple of difficult questions, and one of them is this. What is your go-to? What is your go-to response when you see weakness? What's your go-to response to weakness? What do you do? You become impatient? What is your go-to response? Not only is this a good question for you, but this is a great question to be careful of, to watch around you. And if you're in a dating relationship right now, and the person that you're with, you're like, oh, they're so kind, they're so nice to me. But when you talk to other people that know them, they say, no, they're not actually that kind. They're not actually that nice. And when you see that unkindness come out in them, even if it's towards other people, you're like, well, they're always kind towards me. Let me just give you a heads up. They're on their best behavior around you. They might not be on their best behavior around others. That's probably their norm. That's their average, the way they treat other people. And you need to watch how they treat other people. And if they are unkind, that's a huge red flag. Because ultimately, this is what we know. That if people are utilizing kindness, if they're using kindness to get what they want, there's all kinds of pain at the end, because people who use kindness as a means to an end are often mean in the end. Once they get what they want in the relationship, right, their true colors get shown, and they become mean, and there's just pain and hurt and regret in that spot. That's what we're trying to do in this conversation throughout. We are trying to help you avoid that future pain. There's enough pain in relationships in general. We don't need to add on to things that are unnecessary. So if that's something that you see, get out. That's a red flag that says this is an off-ramp that I need to take right now. Adios. Right? So big red flag if they're unkind. Now, Paul actually, he's going to move on, or he's going to tell us a trio of toxic things that we need to not do. So he's told us what love is like a little bit so far. Now he's going to tell us what love is not like. And continues on in verse 4. Love does not envy, it does not boast, and it is not proud. That essentially, Paul is saying, love makes sure that someone else has the space and the room to shine. Not only that, but we should be shining the spotlight on them. Right? When someone has something worth celebrating, we should be on the front row cheering. We should be their cheerleader. We should be the loudest one in the crowd, the proudest one for them. Right? What is that in us? Do you brag about your spouse? Do you brag about them? If you don't, this is a muscle that you need to practice, that you need to strengthen, you need to grow in your life. You should be the one that cheers the loudest for that most important, most valuable relationship that we have. The next thing that Paul tells us when it comes to love, what we should not do, love does not dishonor others. This word might be foreign to you when you think of your dating relationship. You're like, wait, what does honoring someone have to do with anything? Isn't that something that we an honorable judge or something like that? No, this is absolutely integral for us to be able to express love for someone else by honoring them, not by dishonoring them. And see, honor and love does not create regrets with other people. When we dishonor someone, we create regrets for them that they wish they wouldn't have, that they wouldn't have done that they wouldn't have been with, that they wouldn't have said, right? That's what dishonoring does. And in fact, I understand this at a large level, where if you are in a spot where you're out to dinner with some friends or whatever, and you have that depth of relationship with your significant other, your spouse, and because of that intimacy, you actually have access to their vulnerabilities. That's what intimacy gives you, is access to vulnerabilities. And in those moments where you're like, man, this would be the funniest joke. Like, I would bring the house down if I just, this one last point, if I just made this one last point. But that would be dishonoring. And that would do something in the relationship that you have with your spouse. And that, what happens in the middle of that, is way more important than whether you get a laugh at the dinner table or not. So, oftentimes, the way that we honor someone is by closing our mouth and not saying what we know we could say, not going after that biggest laugh or making that biggest point. Paul describes honor this way. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, he writes, in humility, value others above yourselves. It's pretty simple. And we think, wait, are we supposed to treat other people as if they're more important than us? Well, that's kind of what he says, right? If you treat someone more important than yourselves, does that make them more important than yourself? No, that's not what it says. In fact, Jesus did this with you. He treated you, he came to earth, stepped down from heaven and became, took on the form as a man, as a servant, right? He made himself less than. He should have garnered the whole spotlight and the whole authority and the whole power, but instead he chose to be, take on the shape and the form of a servant. To value someone else doesn't mean that you devalue yourself. Now, the real easy way to actually think about it is if you would imagine winning a contest to go to dinner with your favorite actor, your favorite athlete, your favorite artist, whoever it might be, your just favorite famous person. If you won a contest to go to dinner with that person, think about the preparation that you would go through. Getting ready for that night, you wouldn't just throw on whatever you had. You wouldn't just show up with you just got done working out and you just showed up in your sweats. You would make sure that you looked good, that you smelled good. That's probably important too. But you would be prepared, right? You would think through, what do I need to do to be ready? You would show up early, wouldn't you? You wouldn't wait to the last second. You wouldn't make them wait on you, that's for sure. Because ultimately, this is what we know. If you were in that spot, you would bring your best version of you to the whole entire evening. You would bring your best version of you. This means that if they showed up late, you wouldn't even say anything. You wouldn't say, come on, Denzel. They've already served me water twice. I've been waiting for you forever. What happened? You wouldn't say a word. You would not say a word. And when he started speaking or she started talking, you would hang on their every word. You'd be so in tune with what they were trying to say. You wouldn't try to work the conversation back to you and so you could brag on yourself. No. It'd be all about them. You would be all focused on them. That's how you honor someone, right? When was the last time you went on a date? What did you do on that date to honor your significant other, your spouse? What did you do in preparation for that? Now, when it comes to honor, and this is another huge red flag, if you're in a dating relationship and just consistently the other person is dishonoring you, the way that they treat you, the way that they say things about you behind your back or in front of you, or the way that they just don't even give a care about what you're trying to communicate. They're not really paying attention. They're not really listening. If they're consistently dishonoring you, then this is something you need to take seriously. Because when they communicate dishonor, that you're dishonorable, this is ultimately what they're communicating, that you're dishonorable, over time you will start to believe that. You'll start to believe that about yourself. And this is what we know. This is what we know. That the value of a thing is the price that it brings. The value of a thing is the price that it brings. And your value is massive because you were bought at a price. That Jesus, approaching the cross, looked through the lens of history to you. And he made the decision that you are worth his ultimate sacrifice. That he would lay down his life once and for all for you. For you to have access, for you to have a relationship with the loving Heavenly Father. That's the value that you have. You have inherent value and worth. And you should not ever let someone speak otherwise. And you for sure shouldn't also dishonor what God honors. So this is don't let someone treat you this way, and also you best not be treating someone dishonorably as well. Now I know, through all of this, you're probably thinking like, okay, if this is how we describe the date, you show up and you're, you're patient and you're kind and you're honoring and you're so focused on them and you're not thinking at all about you and you're not trying to make yourself look good, you're trying to make them look good. Like, that doesn't sound like a very exciting date, does it? And you get through the end of the night, and instead of like trying to go in for the kiss or trying to do whatever, you're so gracious in that moment, and you let them go back to their house early. You're like, hey, you want me to drop you off? I know you got a big day tomorrow. It's fine. I totally understand. I get it. And you give them the gift of a full night's sleep instead of, dragging them on to the next bar or the next place that you wanted to go to, whatever it was that you were trying to do. Like, you give them that much and you both have a good full night's rest for school or work the next day. That does not sound like a good, exciting date. For sure not one that Hollywood would ever put up on the screen, right? But you're not trying to focus on that 24 hours. Right? The whole conversation about relationship is not about today. It's preparing today for tomorrow. Not about what you can get today. This is unnatural, what we're talking about. It's unnatural because natural is, I'm just going to take what I want. I'm just going to take what I can get right now. But unnatural is preparing for the future, where we become, right? This is the whole conversation. Where we start to become, this is how you become a person worth looking for. This is how you become a person worth staying for. This is how you do it, this conversation. Now, I know that, within the marriages, there's probably a lot of evaluating, like, did we do that before? Did we do that enough? Should we have done that different? Whenever I hear a conversation about relationships, I'm always evaluating my own. And I'm sure that there's a large number of people that are in a marriage relationship right now. And when you got into that spot, when you were proposed to, when if you're in that season of life, they thought that their partner, right? This is where they thought that their partner would be so perfect that it wouldn't require patience. Right? That was the assumption made. For a lot of us, we would say that. Yeah, I just thought that they were so good because they were so good throughout dating and they were so good early on that I didn't even have to worry about patience because that was going to come naturally. We fit together so well. We just meshed so well. I didn't even have to worry about that. And now, years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, 20, however long you've been together, you realize everybody requires patience. Everybody requires patience. Everybody requires margin. Your relationship requires margin, regardless of how long you've been in it, and especially the longer you're in it. And if you're preparing right now for a forever relationship, then you best start to practice. You best start to prepare for that relationship by implementing those things. I started off saying that my relationship with Amy is one of the most, my favorite aspects of my life. That doesn't mean that it's easy. Marriage has forced and will always force people to work on themselves. It will force you to face your own selfishness. It's difficult and it's hard because we like to be selfish. That's what's natural. It's to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. What's unnatural is to prioritize someone else over yourself. And that's difficult and that's hard. And just about the moment that you feel like you've got it on lockdown, you're like, okay, I think I got this whole selfishness thing down. I think I've got this figured out. You'll look down and you'll be holding your firstborn child and you'll realize how selfish you are all over again. Because these most important relationships require the most from you. They require you to become the person that God has planned out for you, the person that God placed the potential in at the very, very start. Right? That's the person that he wants us to become. Someone worth finding and someone worth staying for. Now, I'm going to close up there for today, and then we're going to actually pick up right there where we left, where I'm leaving off right now, next week for the second part of this. Well, actually, the third part of this series, but the second part of the fine print. So let me pray, and we're going to finish out here. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you do for us. We thank you for the relationships that you bring and for the opportunity for us to be so intentional, that we would choose to become the person that we're looking for is looking for, that we would choose to become the person worth staying for in our relationships, that we would choose to become the person that our spouse hoped that we would become, the person that we knew and know that we should be moving in the direction of. God, these are simple things: to be more patient, to be more kind, to be more honoring of others. Those are not difficult things to think about, but they require effort to become. So God, I pray that we would take every ounce of energy that we have, every ounce of intentionality, every ounce of perspective, and apply that and implement those things into our lives, that we would start to move in that direction. Thank you for everything that you do for us, God. In your name I pray. Amen. Now, real quick, before I hop off here, I have a couple things for you. One is a challenge, and the other is some discussion questions just to keep the conversation going. The first of all is the challenge. This is how you can actually start to move practically in this direction that we've been talking about this morning or today. And that is simply to get yourself a Bible, if you don't have one already, or you can download the YouVersion app or whatever it might be, and actually find 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and read verses 4 through 7. And just read that every single day from now until the next message that we do. So read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7 every day. And then when you're done reading that, I just want you to say a simple prayer. Heavenly Father, help me to become more patient. Help me to be more kind in the relationships I have. Help me to make sure that I shine the spotlight on those around me, that I wouldn't be envious or boastful or proud. It's that simple. It's that easy. And the more that we talk about that, the more that we actually bring that back to the forefront of our mind, you will actually see yourself start to move in that direction. Now, the discussion questions are great. If you have a significant other, you can have these, discuss these questions, or in a small group, or what it might be. First of all, question number 1. If a promise is no substitute for preparation, what can you do beginning today to prepare yourself to be successful relationally? Question number 2. Where do you have to work, or where do you have work to do? Is it patience, kindness? Is it public celebration of others? Is it honor? And then finally, question number 3. When you think about dinner with your favorite actor, artist, whoever it might be, what would you remind yourself not to do or say that you typically do or say? So, that's a great starter for a conversation that I think is important to have. And I hope that you start to take steps towards becoming this best version of you. See you later.
Teaching me to see your desire, and I hear the King in my heart. Be the fire inside my veins, the anchor of my days. Oh, He is my soul. 'Cause You are good, You're good. Oh, You are good, You're good. Oh, You are good, You're good. Oh, You are good, You're good.
You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down.
We can have confidence.
You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. We believe, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, no. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. 'Cause You are good, You're good. Oh, 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 I know that you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, no. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, 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 no. 'Cause You are good, You're good. Oh, You are good, You're good. Oh, yes, You are good, You're good. Oh, yes, You are good, You're good. Oh. And I've carried a burden for too long on my own, and I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. Yeah, I see it now. I'm laying it down, and I know